Good afternoon and welcome to Lunch Break Live with Tea Party Patriots. I'm Jenny Beth Martin. Thanks so much for joining us. In a minute, we'll go to Bill Pasco for our Washington report. Before we do that, please make sure you share this Lunch Break Live with Tea Party Patriots action with your friends and family so they also get an update from Capitol Hill and for the calls to action that we have. So make sure you click the share button and share it with your friends and family. Now we are going to go to Bill Pasco for our Washington report.
Thank you, Jenny Beth. The House will return Monday and stay in session through Wednesday. The Senate will return Tuesday and stay in session through Thursday. This week in the House will return Monday with first votes set for 6:30 p.m. At that time, the House is scheduled to consider 17 bills under suspension of the rules. On Tuesday and Wednesday, the House will consider the following legislation under a rule. H.R. 3195, the Superior National Forest Restoration Act. H.R. 764, the Trust the Science Act. H.R. 615, the Protecting Access for Hunters and Anglers Act of 2023. H.R. 3397, the Western Economic Security Today Act of 2023. H.Res. 1112, denouncing the Biden administration's immigration policies. H.R. 6090, the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act of 2023. H.R. 2925, the Mining Regulatory Clarity Act of 2023. And that's it. Last week in the Senate returned on Tuesday and took up a motion offered by Utah Republican Senator Mike Lee to table the amendment tree that had been constructed by Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. The motion to table was rejected by a vote of 48 to 50. Then the Senate voted by 80 to 19 to move to cloture on H.R. 815, the legislative vehicle for the emergency supplemental. Then, by a vote of 79 to 18, the Senate passed the Emergency Supplemental National Security Funding Bill, and then they were done. This week in the Senate will return Tuesday with the first vote set for 5:30 p.m. At that time, the Senate will proceed to a roll call vote on cloture on the nomination of Georgia N. Alexakis to be a U.S. District Judge for the District of Northern Illinois. Then, based on the Majority Leader's cloture filings, I anticipate we'll also see votes on the reauthorization of the Federal Aviation Administration. Now, let's talk some more about that emergency supplemental, the National Security Funding Bill. After the $95 billion emergency supplemental bill passed the Senate on Tuesday, President Biden signed it into law on Wednesday and said the U.S. government was already in the process of sending weaponry to Ukraine. The bill contains $61 billion that's devoted to military assistance to Ukraine, including longer-range missiles known as the Army Tactical Missile System, also called ATACMS. The Ukrainian government has been asking for these weapons since Russia expanded its invasion in 2022. Now let's talk about the motion to vacate. I have absolutely nothing new to report on this front except for this. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who introduced a motion to vacate the chair more than a month ago, is getting very close to put up or shut up time. She's been giving interviews to right-wing MAGA media demanding that Speaker Johnson resign his position. Yesterday, she tweeted that, quote, his days are numbered, unquote, but she still has not yet declared her intent to designate her resolution as privileged, and she has said nothing about forcing a floor vote. Given that this week the House is only going to be in session through Wednesday, If she wants action this week, she would have to call up the motion today, and then the leadership would have to hold the vote by 7 p.m. on Wednesday. So stay tuned, and we'll see what happens. Now let's talk about anti-Trump lawfare. There was significant motion on two fronts in the multiple-front legal war being waged against former President Trump. On Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, all eyes were on the New York City courtroom, where Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg is prosecuting Trump on 34 charges of illegal bookkeeping. The previous week was devoted to picking the jury of 12, along with 6 alternates. Last week, we finally got some witness testimony, and first up for the prosecution was David Pecker, former chief of American Media, the parent company that owns the National Enquirer. The trial will resume Tuesday with testimony from a banker. On Thursday, everyone's attention was in Washington, D.C., where the Supreme Court heard oral arguments in the case special counsel Jack Smith has brought there against President Trump, charging Trump with trying to overturn the 2020 election by fraud. The former president's lawyers have filed a motion claiming that the former president has immunity from criminal prosecution, based on the reasoning that led the Supreme Court in a 1982 case to determine that former presidents do enjoy immunity from civil lawsuits. The oral arguments were very interesting. As you've heard me say for years on this broadcast, I am not an attorney, and I do not even play one on television. But I can read and I can listen. And based on the questions I heard from the various justices during the oral arguments, I think it's fair to say that most of the mainstream media was left with their mouths agape, because it was clear that the justices are actually considering what kind of limitations there should be on the immunity from criminal prosecution they're about to rule a former president enjoys. Unlike what most members of the mainstream media had predicted, which was that, of course, President Trump enjoys no immunity from criminal prosecution of any kind simply because he was former President Trump, it was clear that a majority of the justices are thinking about what are the limitations on the immunity. I think they're going to send this case back down to the district court with instructions for the trial judge to determine as a matter of fact which actions which led to the indictments are considered official acts versus which acts are considered private activity. And then the ones that are considered official acts, I predict, will be immunized in some form. The tough part for the former president is that his lawyer acknowledged that much of the activity that led directly to the charges of fraud against him was what he called private acts. Immunity is not going to save the former president. But if a majority of the Supreme Court decides to send this case back to the district court with instructions, then it's going to take the judge time to do that. Judge Chutkan will have to ask each party to file paper with her, and then she's going to rule. And then whichever side doesn't get what it wants is going to appeal. And then that appeal will be appealed, and the Supreme Court would just about have to agree to hear that appeal. And the net result is that this case is not likely to go to trial, let alone be completed before the election. Now let's talk about the 2024 election. CNN released a new survey showing former President Trump leading President Biden 49 to 43% in a two-way race. That 6-point lead grows to a 9-point advantage at 42 to 33% in a contest featuring third-party candidates. And now finally to the Jenny Beth Show. Episode 63 of the Jenny Beth Show dropped last Wednesday. The episode features Jenny Beth's discussion with Cleta Mitchell and covers a wide range of topics. Cleta is the best election and campaign lawyer in the country and is now head of the Election Integrity Network. It's a great discussion and is highly recommended. And that's our Washington Report for this week.
Bill, thank you so much for that Washington Report. For this week's call to action, please check our website at teapartypatriots.org. Again, teapartypatriots.org. We'll have that call to action up later this afternoon or tomorrow, so please be sure to check that out. And then if you have any questions at all about what you heard during the Washington Report, shoot me an email at jenny.beth@teapartypatriots.org. Again, that's jenny.beth@teapartypatriots.org. and we will talk to you again next week for Lunch Break Live with Tea Party Patriots Action.